I'm just really impressed by everything. I said to Megan this morning, I have to put this somewhere else, it'll drive me crazy. I said to Megan this morning, I had a momentary panic last night when I was out on a walk with my new puppy after work, and I was praying and thinking about today, and I realized I've actually never spoken to a group of American women. And I was like, and then I talked myself off the cliff, and I was like, they're just women, and they're the same as other countries, everything's fine. So I say that as a slight disclaimer that if something is weird, please know that it's because I spent most of my adult life after 21 not living in this country until a few years ago again. So I'm more seasoned in ministry abroad. But I'm so excited to talk with you guys today. I love women. I'm kind of obsessed. I think we are the superior gender in so many ways. And some of those I'm going to talk to you about later in our second session, so that's a spoiler. Don't leave after lunch if today goes bad this morning. But I'm continuously amazed at the gift and privilege it is to be a woman. And God's heart for women, I think, is so evident in the Bible, and I think not often preached. And not in a negative way, but just typically our pastors are men. And so they have a male tint to things, and that's wonderful, and I think that's great. I'm not diminishing that, but I think there's such a beauty when there's like a complementary system in place where we see men and women flourishing in their gifts well, and women knowing theology well. So anyways, I was super honored. I love Meg. She's one of my Ezra ducklings, and you'll know what that means later. And this whole team has just made everything very easy for me. So I hope you thank the team so much, because they've put a ton of work and effort into this day. And putting it on for you to be a blessing for you. And I think their heart was so evident this morning. I was just like, they're just really nice girls. I'm going to stick to the time frame today, which is going to be a miracle of God. Okay, so I want to talk to you this morning about what in the world does it mean to build a foundation on Christ. So this morning is going to be pretty theology heavy. I teach at Lancaster Bible College. I teach in their theology department. And so I really love theology. I'm just a theology girl. I think the Bible is fantastic. I'll die on the hill that it's one of the best books ever written, continuously seeing something new in it. And I think that as women, I want you to love the Bible in the same way I love the Bible. So we're going to talk this morning about what it means to kind of build that foundation upon Christ. Put this down a little more because it goes up with my hair. And then we'll look at Titus specifically. How do we do like relationships with each other as women? So we're focusing on Proverbs 14, and is going to be our passage for today. And Proverbs 14 verses 1 says that the wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down. Whoever walks in uprightness fears the Lord, but he who is devious in his ways despises him. By the mouth of a fool comes a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will persevere him. And when there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come by the strength of the ox. And then skipping down to verses 26 and 27, Solomon writes, the fear of the Lord one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. In this passage today, and when we get into Titus 2 in this afternoon, there's a couple themes that I'm just going to tell you now because you're going to continue to see them hopefully repeated. First, both passages kind of center on relationships. You're going to see focusing a relationship on Christ, a wise woman, the fear of the Lord. In Titus, there's relationships between women together. Both of them focus on Yahweh, the Lord, as the source of life, as the initiator and the originator of where we get our stability. And both of them talk about putting on good theology, that it doesn't just happen. And I think, especially my generation, I'll speak to, and the younger ones, we have a tendency to just think life will happen. We're not as disciplined as some of the elder generations when I look at my mom and my grandma. But good theology and good actions doesn't just happen. We have to purpose to put on good theology. We have to purpose to think rightly. So those are kind of some bigger themes that we'll see in both passages that we'll come back to later. But I'm just gonna, I was talking to my mom also this week, and I was kind of, I usually teach my mom everything I teach, even in my classes on campus, because she loves it and I love it, and it's good practice. And I was like, Mom, more like normally when I teach, I try to have illustrations, especially for girls, because like traditionally girls like stories, it's what we connect to, whereas like boys like the hard facts. And I just said, I was like, I have nothing. Like, this is the Bible, and people are going to get it or they're not. And she's like, okay, Rebekah. So I hope that you'll stay with me. And I think the Bible gives us some word pictures and illustrations here, and then we'll have some later. And if that's not your jam, you can listen to a podcast on your way home that will give you stories. All right, but I want to break down this passage in Proverbs. What does it say, and what does it mean for us as women? Okay, a wise woman builds her house, but with folly in her own hands, she tears it down. And the first thing that I kind of see in this when I'm looking at this passage is like, okay, so I want to be a wise woman. Like, I don't want to be a fool. I don't want my house to fall apart. I don't want my life to fall apart. So what does it look like to be wise? And within that, there's this action of building. It's not she built her life and then she's done. Okay, there's this continuous idea that a wise person is building continuously. It's a never-ending process. And I think that's one thing that to me is so beautiful about this book is every time I read it, I'm seeing something new. There's a new concept. God takes me to a deeper level of trust with him that if I'm walking with him, I am building continuously. But when I think about building, what is God? Like who is God? What are we building our life upon? And so I'm going to take you guys. This is a bonus, a fun fact for you all. Do any of you know the most quoted verse in the Bible by the Bible? There's like a lot of rumbling, but I can't hear you. And John 3:16 actually is not quoted anywhere else in the Bible, by the Bible. It's in Exodus. Okay, I'm going to tell you, that's fine. Those are all good verses, okay? You're going to prize for other things later, so don't feel bad about yourselves. A+ for effort, ladies. No, the most quoted verse in the Bible by the Bible, which means other authors came and later used it, is in Exodus 34. Okay, so if you want to go to Exodus 34, we're going to kind of actually camp out there for a bit before we go back to Proverbs. So what's happened, just to kind of orient you into the time period, is that Moses, we all hopefully know who Moses is, was a slave in Egypt, ran away, met God in a burning bush, which is really, really weird. God told him, hey, go back, save your people, take them out of slavery, okay? So the Israelites, after all these 10 miracles take place, or plagues, people call them too, after these 10 plagues, miracles take place, God sends his people out of Egypt. Okay, so they're wandering around in Sinai. So we are now in the time period where they've been at Mount Sinai, camping out for a while. They're saved. The Egyptians, crashed in the Red Sea when it closed again. God has already given Moses the 10 commandments, okay? But Moses is still struggling with doubt, which is such a relatable thing. He has been with God. He has seen the burning bush. He has gone up on the mountain. God has given him stone tablets of 10 commands how to live and orient their life. And still he's like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't know if I trust you. Moses says, goes and talks to the Lord. In chapter 33, he's talking with the Lord. He's interceding again on their behalf. Moses says, you've said to me, God, bring up my people. And you've said that I will know you, that you found favor in my sight. This is verse 13. But if I found favor in your sight, God, now show me your ways. I want to know you. I want to know that I found favor. Consider, too, this nation. These are your people. Okay? God says to Moses, my presence is going to go with you. I'm going to give you rest. So they're having this whole conversation. Moses says, verse 18, God, show me your glory. Okay, so here is Moses, a face-to-face conversation with God. And still Moses is like, I don't even know who you are, dude. Like, you're kind of like, is it the wizard behind, the robe? Is there smoke that Moses can't see? And Moses doesn't see God. They're having this conversation, but it's veiled, right? Can you just show me your glory? And God says, I'm going to make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, and I'm going to be gracious to you, okay? So here's the thing I want to share with you, ladies. Some theological truth is, back in the ancient Near East, the time of the Old Testament, names held significance, okay? I would say today we normally name our children because we like the way a name sounds, right? Like, Ava's really beautiful. That's why it's always, in the top 10 lists of every girl's name in the universe, right? Olivia also has a beautiful cadence to it. We like the way these names sound. But back in the time of the Old Testament, your name determined your character and who you were. So you were named off of who you would become and who you are. So here's Moses, desperate for God to show him his glory, to know who he is. And God says, I'm not going to let you see me. I'm not going to show you my glory. I'm not going to show you my power, but I will tell you my name. And actually, Moses, that's more impactful for you because that's my character and that's who I am. And that's what you're going to settle yourself upon as you go through the wilderness, which should have been at that time just a quick 3-day journey into the promised land. Okay? So they have this agreement that God will do this and declare his name. So we get to verse 34, verses 6 and 7. These are the two verses quoted by the Bible more than any other verse in the Bible. I'll start at verse 5. The Lord descended in a cloud and stood with Moses there, and he proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God that is merciful and gracious, who is slow to anger, who is abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. The Lord, a God that is merciful and gracious, who is slow to anger, who is abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands. When Solomon comes on the scene in Proverbs, and he says that a wise woman builds her house, he wants this wise woman to build the house on the knowledge of this covenantal love of God. Okay? Who is God in his character? What does he say his name is? He says his name is the Lord, a God who is gracious and compassionate. A.W. Tozer, who's a theologian, I don't know if you know him or not, he has a really famous quote where he says, "What comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you." And I just invite you girls to just take a minute and close your eyes and think about that. What do you think about God right now today? Not what you think you should think about God, but when I say the word God, what is the picture in your mind? What is the picture? What are the words that come to mind? Who is that? I'm not going to ask you to yell back at me. And if you have times in your small group, it might be worth sitting with that and just being honest and sharing that. The reason is because what we think about God shapes how we relate to him and how we relate to each other. And if we want to be women who are building a house on a foundation of truth of who God is, we need to get out of our minds the wrong things we think about God, and we need to put into our mind the truth of who God is. And we need to be actively working, building upon that. That's what a wise woman does. That's why I want to spend time in Exodus, because I think it's just so important that we understand who is God. This is not just the most quoted verse in the Bible by the Bible. This is the first time God ever says who he is. This is it, okay? He's given his name to Abraham, Yahweh, okay? The covenantal keeping God. But this is the first time he says, this is who I am. This is my character. And I think I'm not speaking out of hand to say that growing up in America, living in America today, we have a lot of gods, a lot of images of God. Okay, and conversations of, well, this is who I think God is, this is who I think God is, well, this is the God I worship. And what I would encourage and urge and exhort you is to try so much as you are able to put those ideas you think about God aside and begin to build your life on what is true of who God is. And I would even go so far as to say, for some of you, that's going to be really hard. For some of you, it's probably easy. You probably grew up in a church having really good theology, really good parents, so you kind of were nurtured in a really beautiful, healthy concept of God. But for some of you, that's going to be really hard. I know for me, I'm an abuse survivor, and there was a season in my life that it was really hard for me. I grew up knowing who God was, but it was hard for me to relate that to my experiences because they were so distorted and they were so broken, and trying to put this into a framework. And what I would just say to you is the only way we do that is actually by reading this book and actively participating in the building of our wise homes, which means that we spend time thinking about the truth of who God says he is. Okay? We relate to God in these different ways because of his goodness, because of his kindness to us. The other reason I love this passage in Exodus, and I think it's important that we spend time just thinking about what we think about God, even though it's kind of silly to say, is we really do become like what we worship. And so if our concept of God that we're worshiping is somebody who does what I want, that's like the genie that I go to when I'm having a bad day and I pray, oh Lord, could you please make this happen? If that's our concept of who God is, then we're gonna live our life in kind of a state of panic, always needing him to give us something. It's not a good foundation. It doesn't settle our hearts. God is not a genie. God is somebody that we want to worship. We want to shape our lives about him because he is gracious and he is kind and he is full of steadfast love and long suffering. That is the concept of God that we want to orient ourselves to, that's motivating us and driving us. In Exodus, when the second command that's given in the Ten Commandments is not to take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And when I was growing up, that was always told to me that means like, don't cuss, Rebekah. My mom would always say, don't cuss. I had a cussing problem because my neighbors cussed, and I didn't know. So the first time it happened at dinner one day, I said, a cuss word, and it was like silence. And I was like 6 years old. I didn't know what I said, but so I had to. My mom really worked on me. Don't cuss, Rebekah. So that is not, though, what it means to take the name of God in vain. Okay, to say, oh my gosh, or other derivatives that I won't, because it's kind of offensive still to people, and I want to respect you. That's not what this passage is saying. When Moses wrote that command, what that command meant was that we would actually bear God's name, that we would be his representatives. Okay, which this goes even all the way back into Genesis and how we're made in God's image. We're his vessels on earth to represent him, just like an ambassador. We send the American ambassador to Israel. I would visit him all the time, well, not him, but the embassy, when I had an issue with my American citizenship or when I wanted to vote in the elections. I'd go to the embassy, and the ambassador I trusted collected all of our votes and would ship them back to America, to the states where we're representative. We're to be God's ambassadors, and how we bear God's name on this earth is representing him well. But again, if we're going to take his name in vain, what that literally means is we're not representing him well. We haven't built our life and oriented ourselves on what is true. And so many of us think it's just a matter of actually what we say, and it's really so much deeper and bigger and more expansive that we bear God's name in our actions and how we move and interact on this earth. That's what it means to take God's name in vain. That's what it means. It's like literally disowning someone, right? Megan comes to class every week, and she represents herself, but she represents her family. She's a representative of them, and how she interacts with all of us in the classroom testifies to them. That's how it is for us as believers. Okay? So what do we represent? What are we trying to live our life and in this world to demonstrate, to build upon? That we have a God, the Lord, first of all, this is the Yahweh word, okay, which means the covenant-keeping God. Okay, all the other gods and all the other ancient Near East in Genesis, there's a lot of words for God: Elohim, Adonai, El Shaddai. They're all really great ones, but only Yahweh is associated with the covenant. And a covenant is made between two people. I'm not even going to get into it, but a covenant is like an amazing thing that if we had more time, I would spell out for you. But the purpose is, in this passage, when God declares himself, he doesn't say that I'm Elohim, okay, that I'm one God among gods. He doesn't say I'm Adonai, which means lowercase Lord. He says, no, I'm the Yahweh, the God of the covenant with your ancestors, the God who took you out of Egypt, the God who brought you to this place. Ladies, if we're going to build our house on something, we need to build our house on the knowledge that our God is a covenant-keeping God who has been the same yesterday, today, and forever, and will always be the same. And what is his covenant based upon? The fact that he is gracious, that he is merciful, that he is slow to anger. I love that word in Hebrew because it literally means his nose grows slowly, like in anger. If you're angry in Hebrew, you have a fast nose, which I think, how relatable is that? Because people get really scrunched up faces when they're angry. It says that God is abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness and keeping steadfast love. Just like we're building, hopefully continuously building our house, God is continuously keeping his love. He's steadfast and faithful to us. Okay? Jesus, when he comes on the scene, and we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about Jesus because I think our churches do that so well. I think we lack Old Testament theology in America today. But when Jesus comes on the scene, who we know, because Paul says he's the image of the Father. Okay? So again, what is God like? Well, we know because he's told us right here what he's like. This is what we build our lives upon. But then Paul says, and also Jesus, in case you didn't get it back in the Old Testament, Jesus is the image of the Father. And what does Jesus say? The only time in all the Gospels when Jesus says what is in his heart, do you remember what he says, what's in his heart? He says, I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Again, what is in your mind when you think about God? What are you shaping and building your life upon? Is it an image of God? I don't know what the image is, but I would hope that it's built upon the God who is just and righteous, but who is gentle and lowly in heart for you, who desires for you to flourish, who desires you to know his covenantal love, that he doesn't care what you've done, he just thinks you're really great. We go back to Proverbs. The wise woman builds her house. builds it upon the truth of who God is, not an idea of God, but who he truly, truly is. Verse 2 says, whoever walks in uprightness fears the Lord, and the devious in his ways despises him. Okay, so we want to be ladies who are building our house on truth, on like the knowledge of who God really is, but we also want to be women who are walking in uprightness. There's these two action verbs, building and walking. These are not stagnant things. And I don't really actually know any of you, but like Megan and like the team-ish, but like, I think we get complacent, ladies. I think we get complacent and we let life happen and we let it be an excuse. Instead of owning our life and owning our choices and owning the agency that God has given us. You know that agency is such a gift that nothing else and no other mammals, animals, they don't have agency. We have agency as humans to make choices. You have the ability to walk, to choose to walk in righteousness, in obedience. I think, again, so often we don't like talking about obedience and submission. They're kind of like, those are kind of cuss words to me, if I'm honest with you. I don't like to submit to things. But over and over, the Bible makes it clear that walking in obedience, walking in righteousness leads to our flourishing and our best life, that God designed us to walk in obedience, to walk in righteousness. And who do we have as our example for that? We have Christ himself. We have Christ himself. Romans 5:19, as one man's disobedience, many were made sinners, and by one man's obedience, many will be made righteous. Philippians 2:8, being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient, even to the point of death. Hebrews 5:8 says, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. I wonder what it looks like for each of you to walk in obedience. Are you walking in obedience? Is your life reflecting what it means to walk out the righteousness of Christ? If God is a God who is gracious and compassionate and slow to anger, if he's a God of covenant keeping, what does it look like for you as his daughter to be obedient and to walk also in those ways? How are you doing that? I think those are questions you need to answer, because we're called to conform to the image of Jesus. To walk out our sanctification is a process of becoming more like him. And if Jesus was obedient, even to death, I think we need to consider, what does obedience look like for us? And we shouldn't run away from it when it's hard, because I think death to me seems pretty hard. But if Jesus didn't walk away from death, I think we need to embrace the reality that sometimes obedience is hard. It's not what our friends are doing. It's not what society is doing. And I would argue that's why we need our sisters to be doing it also. But I'm skipping ahead, so come back. Okay, what does it look like to be obedient? Again, Ezekiel writes for us in Ezekiel 11, he says, I'm going to give them a new heart. How do they be obedient? Don't worry, I'm going to give them a heart. God says, I'm going to do it. Again, who is this God? He's the one who calls us to something and then provides the means for us to do it. It's like pretty cool. I'm going to give them a new heart. I'm going to give them a new spirit. I'm going to put it within them. I'm going to get rid of a heart of stone and from their flesh, and I will give them this new heart of flesh so that they can walk in my statutes, that they can keep my rules and obey them. They will be my people. I will be their God. He's giving us a heart that enables us today to walk out what it means to know him and make him known, what it means to build our house on his foundation and then walk that out among each other and among a society that is desperate for some measure of truth and hope. In a book that I really love called Bearing God's Name, the author writes that obedience and faith can almost be considered synonyms. To claim belief in God without obeying him, to bear his name in vain, is an unthinkable contradiction. That if we claim that we are God's daughters, that we're his children, We have to be walking out in obedience, what that looks like. And again, I know that we don't like that, especially my generation and younger. That really makes you uncomfortable. And I receive that uncomfortableness and I ask you to sit in it anyway. Because that is the gift and invitation of our good Father, who's a covenant-keeping God and who loves us. Proverbs 2, whoever walks in the uprightness fears the Lord. Okay, so what does righteousness mean? Again, in Hebrew, this is the word sadiq. It means literally a straight path. Whoever walks in a straight path. Okay, as women, we want to build, the wise woman builds her house. What do we build it upon? The truth of who God is, not our concept of who God is, but who he really is. And then we're going to walk that out following him on his straight path that he's laid before us, that he's made it clear. He spells out how we do that in this book, if we'll take the time to be with him, to read it, to know it. Theological terms, the righteousness, this is like one of God's communicable attributes, okay? There's like so many of them, like he's omniscient, it's cool, he's omnipotent, omnipresent, okay, all these big omni words, we can talk about them on a break if you really care, but his righteousness is one of his communicable attributes. And what does that mean? That means that when he made Adam and Eve in the garden, he gave them a piece of that. It was communicated to us as humans, which means we have the capability of walking out righteousness here on this earth. We have the ability to walk in a straight path because he's given us that as he made us in his image. God, in his nature, again, who is God? Perfectly just and righteous in all things. Okay, his righteousness is inexplicably linked to his holiness. He can't separate himself from it. God's justice, okay, is ultimately given space in Christ's atoning work on the cross, right? So because God is just, he has this need for us to be able to come to him, and we can't do that because we're sinners. So God takes the cross. Okay, this is his gift. God satisfies his own need for justice on the cross. In this redemptive act of Christ, God's holy love is seen as supreme expression of his justice and extreme expression of his grace upon us. This is the foundation that we build our life upon, that God is a just God, that he is righteous in all things, that he is perfectly straight. There is nothing crooked about God. There is nothing crooked about God. And because of that, he's so perfect, we couldn't get to him. So he provided, again, on his own, he provided for us. This is what we build our house upon. And I know for some of you, you're like, Beck, we know the gospel. We get it. We get Jesus. Okay, keep moving on. His blood, it's cool. We'll celebrate it next week for Easter. But you skip over this because it is you're so used to hearing it. You don't actually take the time to think about what that is like, that there is a just God, that we failed to meet his expectations. We could not do it. So on his own, he says, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to tell you what I am like. I am a covenant-keeping God. I am merciful. I am gracious. I am slow to anger. And I'm going to provide a way for you to come to me so that you can then on your own walk out righteousness, that you can on your own be obedient and look to my son who was obedient, who provided a way for you. This is what it means. Again, like we take it for granted. I think especially us who grew up in the church, we take it for granted what that actually means. And we just go about our life and we don't think about it and let our hearts settle in this reality, because it should transform us. It should shape us. It should make us different people. Solomon goes on to write in Proverbs, the mouth of a fool comes a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will persevere them. I love also this concept in Hebrew, the word for lips. It's really better translated for us in English, the language, the words, the speech. Okay? And again, I think this is such a powerful thing for us ladies especially, because most of us like to talk, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. I like to talk, not just like doing this kind of thing, I like to talk. You can ask Megan. I teach, and then on the break, I'm talking the whole break, and then I go back to teaching, and then I talk as I walk out of the building, and then we go home. I love to talk, okay? And Solomon says, the mouth of a fool becomes a rod, okay? It's a detriment to them. But the lips of the wise will persevere them. And what I think Solomon is saying by this is the words we say about God is going to persevere our life or not. Are we, and I wouldn't even say the words that we say, because a lot of us, I think, especially in church, we're really good at like Christianese, like, I'm doing great, life is awesome, right? Even though like something horrible just happened that week. I think even more than what we actually say are the thoughts that we have in our mind about God. Are we thinking thoughts about God and ourselves that are true? Will they persevere us, or are they gonna be like a rod on our back? And ladies, I think your self-talk, I think you need to be a lot more disciplined, I would argue, in how we talk to ourselves. Would you be your own friend in your mind to yourself? Are the words that you're thinking in your mind about yourself and about God, are they built upon what is true, that he freaking loves you and thinks you're amazing? Or are the words that are going on constantly in your mouth and what's coming out like, well, I'm not lining up with that person on Instagram. Well, I didn't do that today. You know, I didn't make a cool reel. Like, what are the thoughts you're thinking? And are they persevering you, or are they a rod on your back? Because you have the ability, Solomon says, to build your house and to walk out uprightness. So are you walking out uprightness in what you say about yourself and what you think about yourself and what you think about God? You have a foundation. Are you actually utilizing it in how you build? The word also, I love this, that the lips of the wise will persevere them. This literally means they will guard them. Are all thoughts and are what we say about God so accurate to what this word says is true that it guards us, that we don't have to fear anything because we're saturated and built and secure? I think it's something to process through and to think through. Verse 4, where there's no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come by the strength of an ox. I just really like this because somebody mentioned it earlier, I forget even who now, but working with women is really messy. I don't know if you know that, I don't know what your experience is, but I think in general, in class, I will tell, these are future ministry leaders, people are the best, they're the freaking worst, okay? I love women, but I have not been immune to hurt at the hands of my sisters. And when you are truly trying to start something and walk out building something and walk out what it means to know God, I don't think we should be surprised that there's a mess that comes also. I'm not saying a mess is good. I think we should strive to do better because of walking out what it means to know God. But I love this. Where there's no oxen, there's a clean manger. Of course. If there's no people, things are clean. Of course. But when you put women together and they're growing in Christ, there's going to be conflict. And I think that's okay. I'm not saying we strive for it. I don't think we aim for it. But I think you need to know that it is only when there is the strength of ox that abundant crop comes. And I would encourage you that when those moments come that are hard and there is a mess in the manger because there's a lot of ox in there, a lot of you ladies, it's like I don't know what a cute female animal would be. Sheep, I think they're really cute. Sheep in the manger, I don't know. But like when they're all there, it's okay. You don't leave each other. You don't break relationship. Why? Because you have a foundation of Christ. And so you work it out. You sit in the mess till because of what Christ has done, it can be restored and reconciled. Going on, verse 26 and 27, the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children have refuge. It's the fear of the Lord that's a fountain of life, that one can turn away from the snares of death. I think fear is a hard word for us today because it's so kind of like, we don't fear God, but really what it means to fear something in the original Hebrew and in this time period, it means to have a deep respect or admiration. When we have a deep respect of the Lord, then we have strong confidence. And guys, it's a byproduct. When we actually know who God is, that he is the Lord, gracious, kind, compassionate, when we center ourselves on that, when we respect God so much for what he's given us, the outworking of that is we're going to be confident. Because we know who we are and we know whose we are. But we have to know God. We have to respect him. We have to admire the gift that he has given us. Having a deep respect of the Lord is a fountain of life. And I don't know about you, but when you think about a fountain, it's a continuous bubbling up of water. It's so beautiful. I love fountains, and any water in my entire life, I'll never get sick of them. It's this continuous coming up. When we actually know God, when we build our life upon him, when we walk in his truth, when we respect and admire him because of what he has done, inside of us is a continuous source of life that's bringing peace and calm to our lives and to our sisters' lives. And isn't that what we need? You guys are going to go to your breakouts in a few minutes, and you have some discussion questions about this idea of Christ and who God is, what it means for his covenant love, and centering ourselves upon him. I know these small groups are usually awkward. Maybe that's just me. But I encourage you to lean into that and to give each other the gift of trust, and give each other the gift of trust in the sense that by the end of today, you will be friends. So think of it today as an extension of that friendship that's starting now before it exists.